IVM.
Hi, we're Team Splainer. Welcome to an all-new episode of Press Decode, a weekly podcast where we take Splainer's mission to declutter the news one step further. We take the biggest, most interesting news stories of the week and break them down so you don't have to struggle with insane news pollution. Check out our newsletter for more stories and follow us at SplainerIn to keep up with all the fun things we plan for our Splainer fam. So sit back, relax, and don't let the news give you the blues. I'm Vagda and I have with me Adya, Sara, and Ragini. Take it away, Adya.
Hi, I'm Adya. I graduated with a degree in political science and psychology, ready to change the world one opinion at a time. I'm the bubbly cheerleader friend who's constantly battling the stereotype that a vegetarian foodie is an oxymoron. Current favorites, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Mango Rabdi, and those hilarious self-affirmation posts, trippy backgrounds. If you have not seen them, I will Instagram DM them to you.
Hi, I'm Ragini, and I'm what you get when a kid who watches too much TV ends up getting good grades. Basically, I'm a pop culture nerd to the extent that in my final year of uni, I went as Zeitgeist for Halloween. Anyway, one of the greatest philosophers of our time has said pop culture was an art, now art's and pop culture. And this was, of course, Lady Gaga.
I'm Sara, and given how cynical I sound most times, you'd think I'm 40-ish, but I'm all of 21. Some say I'm funny, whereas some others would say I am the joke. What can I say? The current state of affairs demands that one has ample reserves of humor, whatever be their source.
I'm Vagda, your host for the day. I'm a lawyer and a morning person who struggles to sleep on time. A hopeful lobbyist for the introduction of silly face acrobatics in the Olympics. This might be controversial, but I'm both a cat and dog person, mostly at the receiving end of everlasting pop culture recommendations, to which I politely say, I am adding to my list, but there is no list. This is not to discount the fact that I fell hard for the hot priest in Fleabag, like the rest of the world. Today we have 3 segments for you, starting with our big story, where we talk about the Global South's experience of international sports. In our Food for Thought segment, we will look at the palm oil industry and what it means for our environment's health. In our final segment, we will either roast or toast our fave or least fave news stories from the week that was, where Sara promises to be our in-house grumps. So on that promising note, let's begin with our big story. The biggest story this week has been Neeraj Chopra winning India's first ever gold medal in track and field in the Olympics. It also happens to be the only second individual gold medal in modern Indian Olympic history. Other than that, we also have the highest ever tally of medals with 1 gold, 2 silver, and 4 bronze medals in these Olympics. Yay for India!
Yay!
Chakde woohoo!
So other than the athletes and sports people who won, to whom is credit actually due? We hear narratives and counter-narratives of real support versus people, politicians, and businesses piggybacking on Olympic success.
I'm thinking of a certain someone with a certain couple posters everywhere.
Sarah, you are always thinking of that person. You are only
He
thinking of
ensures
this.
you know. He ensures you know you're thinking about him. He will show you his face.
So who actually supported our athletes and who swallowed funds for their own gain?
Oh, indeed.
Structural issues like privilege, poverty, and discrimination are present everywhere. Not just in India. But are there any parallels that we can draw with other countries?
I think the easiest parallel to draw anywhere is corruption and government apathy. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Specific to the Olympics, it's always been the biggest sticking point in India, where the sporting ecosystem is fraught with infrastructural lapses. Take, for example, the ace golfer Aditi Ashok, who missed out on a bronze at the Olympics by just a whisker. She came back and went on record to point the multiple shortcomings she had to face. For starters, on a daily basis, she had to travel nearly 75 kilometers to reach the golf course in Tokyo because she was housed in the athletes' village, unlike other golfers who stayed in hotels closer to the course.
That's
this would
insane.
mean a 8:18 tee-off time required her to wake up at 3 a.m.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
That's brutal.
My dad goes for his 7 a.m. tee off at like 6:30.
As he should. I mean, it's not even like it's
Basically.
dark outside. And in addition to this ridiculous exercise, she faced immense pressure of performance, all while having the internal pressures of having to compete with the world's best. I mean, need I really say more?
Yeah.
Hmm.
But if you want more examples, take a look at our golden-eyed boy and Times Now declared most eligible bachelor, Neeraj Chopra's situation.
Ooh.
I hope everyone gets the Times Now as most eligible bachelor ref.
Yes, yes. Girls,
Okay.
girls, 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 girls.
Yes. We are all supposed to be happy. Neeraj Chopra is single. Just in case you didn't get the memo.
Your enactment is my favorite thing, Sarah. But it's okay. We'll save it for another day.
So his coach has gone on to slam the Sports Authority of India and the Athletics Federation of India for cancelling prep camps and international competitions for athletes, which meant most of these athletes last performed at an international forum back in 2019. He also complained of these authorities neglecting nutritional demands and treating foreign coaches poorly. And it doesn't end here. And it's not just India. On the international front, the example that really stuck with me was from Nigeria. Puma cancelled a $2.7 million deal with the country after a TikTok of a male shot put thrower at the Olympics showed him washing his apparel by hand because he only had one set for the Olympics.
Oh my
No.
god.
What?
Can I make this worse? This is
Try.
despite the $2.7 million that Puma signed,
No.
saying
How much?
we will $2.7 million, signing that big a deal to produce kits for the Nigerian team to most definitely assure more than one set.
Yeah, that's why I was like, how much?
Yeah.
People have more school uniforms than that. Like, I'm sorry.
Wow.
And despite all these systemic failures, we tend to glorify our athletes for persevering through poor support and still winning medals despite the odds. I mean, yes, we should celebrate them, like in case that was lost in translation. But it also, in celebrating the way they had to reach there, it just goes on to normalize the shit that's doled out to them. They deserve better, man.
For 100%. And speaking of athletes getting treated badly,
Oh.
I don't know if you guys, I don't know if you guys have heard about what happened with the Vandana Kataria, the Indian women's hockey forward.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. For anyone who hasn't, India lost to Argentina in the semi-final, and since Vandana Kataria is a Dalit, a group of upper caste men in her village in Haridwar celebrated this loss by bursting crackers and hurling casteist slurs at Vandana's family because they apparently believed that the team lost because it had too many Dalit players. Now, obviously this sucks, but what sucks even more is the lack of support I'm seeing for Vandana. I don't, tell me if you guys have seen anything else. I've only seen the captain of their team, Rani Rampal, defend her. I haven't seen politicians, any sports authority, no one. I haven't seen anything.
Yeah.
And right?
Me
Because
I
neither.
haven't seen.
Yeah.
so I was thinking of all the racist abuse that the black English players faced after they lost the Euro Cup, and just how much support the players got from their team members, from fans. Boris Johnson tweeted condemning the racist attacks. Yeah, I can't say I'm surprised at this lack of support for Vandana, but honestly, more than anything, I'm a bit confused, right? Because I was like, okay, for a country who has lost more than we have won at the Olympics, the enthusiasm is there. We are quite enthusiastic about these games.
How's the Josh?
Hi, sir.
So all of those things are still there. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's a passion for sport. You know, hello, cricket is a religion in this country. Cricketers are gods. But I mean, in terms of the Olympics, if this is how the athletes are being trained, that is not the case, clearly. So then I was like, okay. So I went into a little bit of history of the Olympics, okay? And the 1936 Berlin Games came up, which are like infamous, okay? Because obviously 1936 is when Hitler was very much in power. So the International Olympic Committee made an active decision to host their games in Nazi Germany.
Okay.
Cool. And Avery Brundage, who was then the president of the IOC, insisted on holding these games despite boycott. So it's not even like at the time people didn't raise a voice. He believed that sports is above national politics. Hence, the boycotts were politicizing the games. What?
You can't take the politics out of anything.
How can you? I mean, if boycotts.
Hasn't that always been Olympics? They've been looking into all kinds of political statements by athletes and everything all this while.
I come with fun fact to make the 1936 Olympics seem a little better historically. There is an article that we read, and I think it's by The Wire. We'll link it in the bio, where basically there were two contingents at this Olympics who refused to salute to Hitler during the march past. One of which was India. The other was the US.
Yeah. See, so exactly. Like countries obviously are political. So they don't not take political stands or whatever. That there is a history of, obviously you have, again, I don't know the details of the year, but there is the athlete who did the Black Power salute. I can't think of any details right now. But anyway, so what I'm saying is that the Olympics has been apolitical in the sense that, so when the Moscow Olympics happened, the Western powers did boycott it, but the Olympics chose not to take a political stand in that sense.
That
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. So anyway, I found this quote by E.J. Hobsbawm where he says, "The imagined community of millions seems more real as a team of 11 named people." And I was like, acha, now I get it. Okay, so this imagined community that he is referring to is this concept. It's basically a concept that Benedict Anderson came up with to describe the modern sovereign nation. So imagined community is the modern sovereign nation over here. So basically, what I understand now is that the Olympics is a way for the people of a country to feel united, that's a sweet enough idea. I mean, okay, cool. But it is also a way for the government of a country to position itself, if it wants, as being above politics. Because that's kind of the spirit of the Olympics. But how can a government be above politics? So my understanding, long story short, is that it's a scam. It's a little bit of a scam.
Now it makes sense to me.
Yeah, basically.
My God. That's a hot take though.
Henna?
That's a really hot take. Because
That's-
what I remember is like when I was watching Neeraj Chopra throw his javelin, and there was the Pakistani javelin thrower, Arshad.
Yeah.
I mean, the commentators in the background were saying thinks of Neeraj as an idol. I mean, and this is like India-Pakistan when Neeraj is actually an army guy. So, I mean, all of these
Yeah.
nuances are kind of like, it's kind of nice to see all how it plays in the Olympics.
Exactly. See, so like in terms of bringing people together, I definitely think it can do that for sure. But, everything else, the reportage that has been happening, I was like, what is going on? So just to make a little bit more sense to myself, I did this deep dive.
You know what I was thinking actually? The moment we began discussing this third world experience at the Olympics, do you guys remember that Ugandan weightlifter, Julius Sekitoleko, this 20-year-old, he ran away from his training camp at the Tokyo Olympics and went missing for 5 days. No one knew where he was, not even his family back home. And the craziest part was, he hadn't even actually qualified for the Ugandan Olympic squad. And yet, he was flown to Tokyo.
Wow. Oh my God.
What went wrong here?
Oh my God.
So much. I mean, governments are barely providing sports gear to their people, like Sarah mentioned, the Puma incident. And yet here we have an extra man flying knowing he hasn't qualified.
Extra man flying, no, he hasn't qualified. I don't know, it's like a very funny image in my head.
Like, but
No,
okay, on the other hand, though, like, how limited must his prospects have been in Uganda, even as a sports player of Olympic stature, like, to be able to try out, to want to flee his homeland and find any work in a foreign land. He was literally like, I would prefer to do any job at all in Japan than go back to Uganda.
Maybe he was getting forced into marriage.
Vagda, not everyone has.
I also want to pop in here. He is married.
Oh,
Right,
maybe
I
that's what he was trying to escape then.
Ouch.
Oh my god.
Because when he first ran away, the note he left said, "Please send all my belongings to my
To
wife."
my wife.
Oh, yeah, he did say that, yes.
Yeah. But like, okay, how insane is that to train and work so hard all these years only to use it as an escape at the end? And this
Yeah.
isn't even a rare occurrence, by the way. There's a report in the Hindu, I'll put that link in our bio, that says 47% of the Kabaddi players that went to Canada for various tournaments between 2015 and 2017 just never returned to India. They just didn't come back. Like, the less surprising bit though is that most of these players happen to be Punjabi. So
Of
the
course.
Canada connection in particular here.
You know,
makes sense.
this sounds a lot this sounds a lot like rich kids who go abroad for their degrees and stuff and then just
yes,
never come back.
Hey, I think, are we talking to two here?
No.
But you're back in our country.
We're in front of you. Hello.
Excuse me. Anyway, but the report also said that like most of these players are young with limited economic prospects in India. And so they essentially use Kabaddi as a gateway to Canada, which made me think of the women from rural areas that we talked about last week who get into sports to escape marriage. So sports is really just a means to an end and not an end in itself.
Wagda, how's it looking for you? Olympics or not? Or marriage?
It's disappointing. Yeah, it's disappointing.
Oh God.
I really thought this would be my one way out of marriage.
Yeah.
But it's harder than you thought, nah?
Yeah, it is.
You can still be the extra man flying knowing you haven't qualified. though.
I remember when you said Olympic stature, and then like I wanted to clarify back then. I mean, he's still a brilliant athlete. I mean, वैसे तो even I didn't qualify for the Olympics. He was in the running. Just
There's a wild
Yeah, when you put it
difference.
like that, you know, it's hard to ignore when you put it like that.
But like the way our governments are treating sports people, it's no wonder they don't want to stick around. Yeah, again, Sarah, I'm going back to a lot of what you said because clearly it resonated with me. Like I just want to reiterate that we really, really do need to do better because now it's like an athlete drain along with the brain drain that's already been going on for
Yeah.
decades.
On that disappointing note, we come to the end of this segment. We will be back after a short break. You're listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Zarina Poonawalla, host of the Empowering Series podcast on the IVM network. I happen to be a peak performance coach and leadership coach by profession, and I'm here to share with you productivity tools, life-altering techniques, and real-life hacks to help you achieve your maximum potential in everything you do, your relationships, professions, careers. So tune in every Monday to unleash your inner power. Be safe, be well, be empowered.
Hello and welcome back to Press Decode on IVM Podcast Network. We're Team Splainer and make sure you follow us at SplainerIn on Instagram and Twitter to keep up with the Splainer fam. You might have heard last week that Patanjali has big plans to build a palm oil empire. The company is planning to set up palm oil plantations in Meghalaya. This is part of the expansion of the group's oil processing company, Ruchi Soya. They've conducted field surveys for high-value cultivation that yields cheap oil. According to Baba Ramdev, the operations will start soon. So now after Babaji tells us to hold our left ear and then our right ear and then to eat his noodles, he'll also serve us with some palm oil. Looking at you, Kunal Kamra. So what's the big deal, right? Palm oil has serious ecological consequences. Today we'll talk about how big of a mess we're in and how we got here.
okay, can I just start with any capitalism that comes with a saffron robe Baba ought to be scrutinized. I'm just saying, you know, I can't have you tell me things like Dunya ki moh maya, forget all of that. But hey, I have 5,425 products that you should definitely check out.
True. That's a
Capitalism.
very good point. Agreed.
Like, bhai, talk about mixed messaging, right?
For sure.
It never sat well with me also.
I'm glad. Anyway, this mighty palm oil empire in the Northeast is going to be nothing short of disastrous for the ecology. Globally, there's consensus that palm oil plantations are one of the largest drivers of the loss of virgin forests in Southeast Asia. About 55% of the plantations in Indonesia and Malaysia have replaced natural forests. which have in turn caused a massive reduction in green cover.
Bro.
So overall, bad news.
Yeah, I was
Yes.
gonna say, sounds pretty bad.
Good assessment, Ragini. Very proud.
Would not have figured it out.
Analytical skills 101.
Right?
Yet, multiple parties, including the state's agricultural departments, are on board with this plan. Why?
Of course.
Oh, of course. I was confused. I was like, bro, tumhara kaam hai.
No, have you-
Agriculture.
just the way MOEF is going and like agriculture departments are going, I'm just like, it's fine.
Fair enough. Someone's beating me to cynicism. Well, the point is basically India is the biggest palm oil importer in the world, and we constitute 20% of all global trade. It costs the country millions in imports annually, and currently only half our demand is met by production within the country. Indonesia and Malaysia, on the other hand, account for over 82% of world palm oil production. So, our government's safe plan comes into play. Any guesses?
Nope.
Yes, please, Adya.
Atmanirbhar Nirbharta.
That is correct.
Oh, that's the game.
Come on, Ragini. This you couldn't analyze or what?
No.
This is all a plan to reduce our import bill on edible oils, which is estimated to be around $10 billion.
Ooh.
Basically, they went, what do you mean you ruin your forests and make money? I will ruin my forests and make money. Trust.
Yeah. You know, so when I first heard this story, I almost wrote it off as just like Baba getting down to some new shenanigans again. You know?
That sounds all sorts of creepy.
Sarah, now you have a very strange mind. Okay, I'm just saying, like, Baba does strange stuff all the time. I was like, okay, maybe he's doing strange stuff again.
Did you all forget the love charger Baba? He was also a Baba getting down to some shady stuff.
What? Anyway, moving swiftly on. So, anyway, I went and read this article about how widespread palm oil is in India. And oh my God, it is. I think we should definitely link that article because everybody should read it because, oh my God, in a nutshell, I guess palm oil is very cheap, like cheap as hell. So it's everyone's go-to oil. But this, like, okay. Anyway, let's perform a social experiment, okay? It's our first press decode social experiment, you guys. Yay. Okay? Can everybody tell me what their favorite chips ka brand is?
Are we talking chips
Anything.
brand or chips flavor? Because
Sure, flavor. Let's go with flavor.
mine is India's Magic Masala. Blue
Love
Lace.
that. Okay.
Mine's Kurkure, the orange one.
Classic. It's a classic.
Mine's the bingo chili sprinkled.
What?
Okay, Sarah.
It's very nice. It's very nice, yeah. Wow.
I don't know about like bingo, but so Kurkure and Lay's are owned by PepsiCo, which uses palm oil, right? Fine, no worries. Chips are not the only snacks in the world. We're Indian. We have all the namkeens and like
Yes.
all, you know. So like
Haldiram's Bhujia represent.
Same actually.
Wow.
I'm addicted to that. Once I start eating, I can't stop. I need to never.
I am so glad you guys have said that because guess who also uses palm oil? Haldiram's.
Oh.
And if we're talking about Indian snacks, we can't not mention Maggie.
Mm-hmm.
But guess who also uses palm oil? Nestle.
Oh my God.
So
I almost want to stop you and say I hate where this is going. But go.
yeah, you will hate it more if you hate it now. Trust me. Okay. Anyway, no worries. Aloo bhujia, aloo wafers. We can make this stuff at home as well, right? Nope. Because most of the oils we find in the market are adulterated with palm oil. Anyway, it's fine. Too much oil is unhealthy for us and we should be avoiding it. Fair enough. But you know what, you guys? I actually really love junk food. So this is making me a bit sad. So I'm thinking I should go shopping. But I better not buy lipstick or shampoo or soap it's everywhere. It's literally everywhere. L'Oreal uses palm oil in their lipsticks. Colgate uses it in their toothpaste. Dove uses it in their soaps and shampoos. Anyway, I have a list here. I'm not gonna... Anyway. It's everywhere. That's my point. It's everywhere. And the shadiest, oh my God, the shadiest part of this whole ordeal is that palm oil is rarely listed by its proper name. So it will appear in the list of ingredients as vegetable oil, vegetable fat, palm kernel oil, palm fruit oil.
Yeah,
Oh my God, yes.
okay,
You
we
get
get
the
it.
point.
Yeah, you get the point. It is everywhere.
Okay, but also, like, I don't know how many of you know this, but the reason palm oil is so cheap and everywhere is because of its exploitative colonial past.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry. Ragini, you were on such a high.
Yeah.
I needed to balance it out.
Oh, this
But
is
of
like,
course.
But like, tell me, what is cheap and omnipresent and does not have an exploitative colonial past? Like, this is the same story of sugar.
is that like a
Valid.
knock-knock joke or something?
I can't believe we're like ha-haing this.
Yeah.
It's quite upsetting.
Sugar is the same thing, and sugar also is not listed as sugar in like most ingredients. It's like fructose syrup and like fructose and like some all kinds of things that you won't even know are sugar.
Fair.
So it's the same thing.
Yeah, but anyway, I think the history of palm oil though is less known. I don't think it's talked about as much as sugar is. So a quick intro. I don't know how quick this is actually, but anyway, palm oil was discovered by the Portuguese on their many, many trips to West Africa and its rainforests. It came into global circulation in the 1500s via transatlantic slave ships, where it was used as food to keep them alive on long voyages, and was also rubbed on them so they could look quote unquote young and sleek before being auctioned off.
This is very
Jesus.
depressing, man.
I know. I'm sorry. This is all from a book in 1711. I'll put the link to the article where I got this from. But anyway, by the 1600s, Europeans were using palm oil for its medicinal properties, as they had witnessed in Africa. And they were followed by the British, who started using it in soaps for its color and its scent. And like once it's made its way into like this everyday commodity as an excellent replacement for tallow or whale oil, the demand only grows, right? Like it was a cheap alternative to expensive fats and oils that was used in the making of all sorts of products like margarine, which is the cheaper version of butter in France, and soaps and candles, and also machinery like machinery oil all over Europe in the 1800s, since this was also the time of the Industrial Revolution. So there was like an actual boom in the demand for palm oil.
Oh, this is turning out to be a real history lesson.
Yeah.
Fascinating but disturbing.
Yes.
But I feel like it's very required. Like I think we need
It is,
need
it
to
is.
know
For sure.
Fascinating but disturbing is the entire history of like colonialism.
colonial or not fascinating though. I would not.
Fair, fair.
But anyway, in 1907, Unilever, the consumer goods company that we all know, makes everything from like food to cleaning agents to beauty and personal hygiene products like Dove, Lipton, Sunsilk, Lifebuoy, Lux.
अरे भाई नहाए किससे नहाए?
Matlab everywhere, guys. Everywhere.
And so it was looking to like West Africa for its palm oil production needs. But obviously, like these people didn't want foreigners coming in because it wasn't as profitable to hand over their land to them. So both land and labor was forced out of them violently via their governments. And other than West Africa, Southeast Asia was a golden find for palm oil production, which brings us to the current day scenario of Indonesia and Malaysia dominating palm oil supply worldwide, like Sarah said, 82%. So, and they come with their fair share of underpaid labor, abusive practices, and dangerous conditions.
Is that really a fair share though?
Nothing is
It's
fair.
an unfair share.
I was actually contemplating it. I was like, should I phrase this as fair share? Because it just doesn't sit right with me. But you get the point. But there also hasn't been like a better alternative so far, just because of how everywhere it is. But it's important, I think, to be aware of the problematic practices that gave rise to a product that's so indispensable to us.
I think the other alternative now is just not to bathe. I mean, the path that's currently being led by celebrities like Jake Gyllenhaal. I mean, not
अगर
bathing is
Jake,
anyway.
you know,
I mean,
अगर जेक जिलनहॉल बोल रहा है तो कुछ तो बात होगी.
करना पड़ेगा.
Guys,
तो
we
बनता है.
live in a tropical, humid country.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that's why this is my
yeah.
winter routine anyway. So I am sustainable in the winter.
This is the absolute wrong takeaway. The takeaway should be no more palm oil plantations, please. Not we should stop bathing.
Okay, so on that note full of stink, we come to the end of our second segment. We'll be right back after a short break. You're listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Naan Curry, Sadaf and Archit stir up a hot pot of stories exploring the age-old breakfast of Old Delhi Nihari. This is a must-check out from the #1 food podcast in India. We'd like to welcome Audiogan to the network. It's an old show about design. We want to kick off this season with Jay Datta, design head at Make My Trip and Go Ivy Bo. He's also the founder of Design Up. Positively Unlimited gets a makeover. Check out the revamped show Say No to Drama with Chetna and learn how to avoid drama in your life. Home is where the heart is. Marathi Kirkitun helps us understand more about homes. On Smarter with Sid, Siddharth asks the pertinent question, is jealousy good for you? And on the Musafir Stories, get introduced to the headhunters of Nagaland. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any other show for that matter, please do tell a friend. Word of mouth is the best way to spread the word about a podcast you love. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, CEAT, Cred, Global Victoria, Bank of Baroda, Intuit India, and CoinSwitch Kuber.
Welcome back to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network. It's time for our final segment this week, Roast or Toast. And it's just become so that we always start with the house grump so that we end on a happy note. Go, Sarah.
Honored, guys, honored. But this item deserves all the grump, and I don't think anyone's going to disagree. On Sunday, a Delhi BJP leader organized a protest march titled Colonial Laws and Make Uniform Laws at Jantar Mantar. The alleged aim to call for a uniform civil code. But the actual result, disturbing rally that turned into a call to kill disobedient Muslims instead. It was all kinds of disturbing, and most of y'all have already probably seen the clips going viral on social media. And it's the impunity with which they went on that has me enraged.
Yeah.
Mercifully, as of when we record, 6 people have been arrested.
You had me at colonial laws. I was like, just stop talking. I don't want to hear anymore.
I want to dedicate my least fave item to our billionaire of the day, Elon Musk, because, we just love to hate on billionaires. So, SpaceX's rocket Starship has been stacked on top of a super heavy booster vehicle, and the resulting orbital launch pad stands at 400 feet tall, higher than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Okay, that's cool, I guess. But they are literally going to disassemble this whole contraption because both the parts need more work before the actual launch test. So actually, nothing has happened.
What is this news?
It's not. Nothing has happened. I pray for the day when we stop considering billionaire playing with their toys to be news.
Oh my God.
There's so many jokes in there, Ragini.
I have to.
Bolo.
I mean, celebrating without the work being done sounds like someone's modus operandi as well.
Sarah, yeah.
It's a talent.
This.
It's
I
talent,
swear, it
Sarah.
really is.
How do you do this, man? Every single
Honestly,
time.
teach us your ways.
Okay, I'm going to go with my favorite item of this week. So parents in Japan are sending bags of rice to relatives with their newborn babies' faces plastered on these bags for those unable to visit. And the amount I know, the amount of rice is exactly the same weight as the newborn baby. So like there's a quote from the article. I'll link that in our bio as well. The bags come in a wide range of designs with some shaped like a baby wrapped in a blanket so that relatives can feel as though they are hugging the new arrival while looking at a picture of their face, which is attached to the front.
Oh,
I think it's so cute.
That's pretty cute. Oh,
I love that story.
I know. Same.
Okay, so I'm going to go to my favorite story this week. It was in our Tuesday edition. Uttar Pradesh Mahila Shikshak Sangh is demanding 3 days of menstrual leave every month for women teachers in the state. And this is not some sidey association. It represents more than 2 lakh teaching staff working in like 1,68,000 government-run schools in Uttar Pradesh.
nice.
Yay for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is the first time I am hearing of a government setup thinking about menstrual leave.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard like private companies doing it. Zomato has done it in the past. Tata Steel has considered it, or I don't know if they've announced it. And I mean, my old office also had it. Vidhi used to offer us menstrual leave as well. But so that was my first thought that, oh, this is the first time I'm seeing a government setup do it. But apparently Bihar has had a similar provision for female government employees for the past 30 years.
No way.
What?
Yeah. They can take 2 days of special leave every month for biological reasons. Now, this is where the taboo comes in. You don't call it menstrual leave. You call it biological reasons. But anyway, like it's there.
30 years ago, I can live with.
Call it whatever you want. I will take
Yeah.
it.
And it's Bihar, dude. Credit where credit is due.
Okay, so that was our show this week. Thank you so much for joining us on Press Decode. You can catch us every Thursday on the IVM Podcast Network. And guys, please remember, don't let the news give you the blues.
If you love cricket, listen up. The Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast is here for you. Hosted by DJ, Varun, and me, Ashwin, we bring a fun, fresh fan's point of view to talking all things cricket. Sometimes it's just the three of us, sometimes we have guests, including current and former international cricketers. For new episodes every week, check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast on the IVM app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We live in an age of disruption, of immense change in every aspect of work, life, and business. But is the old way of doing things truly dead? And are we ever going to stop saying the new normal? Join me, Varun Dugirala, on Advertising is Dead every Tuesday as I talk to entrepreneurs, leaders, creators, and change makers from across business, media, marketing, and beyond to dig a little deeper into how we got here, what we're doing now, and where we're headed. You can catch all the episodes of Advertising is Dead on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcast from.